Hi everyone, my name is Kamini and I am a storyteller. This year, Art Walk Little India 2021 has gone completely virtual. I'm going to be sharing with you two different stories for Art Walk Little India this year. The Thaipusam Story and Cattle Tales, both available as two separate videos on Art Walk Little India's Facebook page. Everyone's heard of the festival and celebration of Thaipusam. But what's the story behind Thaipusam? And why do we pray to Lord Murugan? And why do we carry the kavadi? And what's the meaning of the procession and the entire celebration and ritual? So I'm going to share with you different versions and variations of different tales that are associated with the festival Thaipusam. Thaipusam is usually celebrated between the months of January and February every year. But what does the word Thaipusam actually mean? Thai is the month. During the full moon of the month of Thai, that's when Thaipusam is celebrated. But the full moon in the month of Thai also coincides with the nakshatra or the star Pusam. So Thaipusam is the month Thai and the star or nakshatra Pusam. And together, when you combine both these two words, you get Thaipusam. Thaipusam is a festival of devotion, sacrifice, and also thanksgiving. And in Singapore, the procession for Thaipusam starts in Serangoon Road itself at the Sri Srinivasa Perumal Temple, where the kavadi bearers, the devotees, the chariot with Lord Murugan, the singers, the musicians, and everyone celebrating Thaipusam will start. And from the Sri Srinivasa Perumal Temple, they will walk in a procession all the way down to the Tank Road Temple, the Sri Thendayuthapani Temple, also known as the Chettiar Temple. So once upon a time, a very, very long time ago, there lived a wise and clever sage called Saint Agastya. Now, Saint Agastya was also a teacher, and he had many, many disciples and students. One of his disciples and students was a man by the name of Idumban. One day, Saint Agastya called Idumban to him, and he had a task for Idumban to get done. There were two hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri, that Saint Agastya wanted Idumban to go and lift and carry and bring to Saint Agastya's abode down in the south. Idumban was very strong and he was a devout disciple and student. And so Idumban picked up a big, heavy wooden pole on his shoulder and he walked and walked and walked to these two hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri. When Idumban arrived at the two hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri, he used his pole and he hung both these hills on either side of the pole. And he lifted that pole onto his shoulder and he carried both those big hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri, and Idumban began to walk and walk and walk down south, just like his teacher, Saint Agastya, had asked him to do. Now, it was heavy, and it was hot, and it was a long walk, and of course, Idumban, the strong man that he was, began to feel exhausted and tired. And so when he reached Palani Hills, he decided to take a break. And so he put down his pole with both the hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri, down on the ground, and Idumban sat down for a rest. What Idumban didn't know was that on the Palani Hill was Lord Murugan himself. That was the abode of Lord Murugan. And Lord Murugan saw Idumban with both these hills at the foot of the Palani Hill. And Lord Murugan decided to test the devotion and strength and honesty of this disciple and student Idumban to his master and teacher, Saint Agastya. Soon, Idumban woke up. He tried to pick up his pole and he tried to pick up both those hills, Shaktigiri and Shivagiri. But the hills refused to move. They were stuck to the ground at the foothills of Palani. Idumban tried to lift both those hills. He lifted and lifted and lifted. Hills refused to move. Idumban was tired, he was exhausted. He tried again and again because he knew his master was waiting for both these hills to be brought down south. Idumban looked up at the Palani Hill and there he saw a young boy, a child, laughing and smiling down at him. Idumban became angry. This young boy, this child, was clad and dressed merely in a pure white loincloth and nothing else. How dare this child make fun of him? And so Idumban, in his anger, went up to the child and argued and fought with him. At that point, Idumban had no idea that the child, the little boy, was Lord Murugan himself in his form as a youth or a child Murugan. Idumban fought and argued, but of course he lost to Lord Murugan. Finally, Idumban looked closely at the child and he saw divinity within that child, and immediately he recognized that child to be Lord Murugan himself. Idumban apologized and he looked up to Lord Muruga and asked him for help. Lord Muruga had tested Idumban enough, and he knew that Idumban was a devout and honest student who was only trying to do his master's will. Before Idumban left Lord Murugan, and when he lifted up his pole with both the hills suspended, he asked Lord Murugan to grant him one wish. He asked that in the future, if anyone was to do what he did, which was to carry a pole with 2 heavy weights, Lord Muruga would grant their wish. Lord Muruga agreed to Idumban's request, and that is why, during Thaipusam, all devotees and all those who have faith in Lord Muruga carry something that resembles Idumban's pole with something heavy suspended just like the weights of the 2 hills, Shivagiri and Shaktigiri. This pole or any kind of structure that is constructed to bear weight and is carried by a person or a devotee during Thaipusam, during the procession and festival, is known as a kavadi. So the origin of kavadi carrying can be traced back to the story of Idumban himself. Now you may ask, who is Lord Murugan? Lord Murugan is the son of Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati. Now, Lord Murugan is always depicted with a veil or a spear that looks something like this. The veil was gifted to him by his mother, Goddess Parvati, so that he could fight and defend the people. There's a story about the veil that also explains why Lord Murugan's Vahana or vehicle is the beautiful, colorful peacock. Now, Lord Murugan, he fought many battles, and in one of the most famous battles where Lord Murugan had to fight against the Asuras, also sometimes known as demons, one of the Asuras transformed himself into a mango tree. Now, of course, Lord Murugan knew exactly who the mango tree was, and so with his veil, he threw that spear and the mango tree split into two different halves. Now, one half turned into a beautiful, colorful peacock, and the other half turned into a magnificent rooster. That is why Lord Murugan's vehicle or Vahana is the peacock, and that is why Lord Murugan's flag, the symbol, the emblem, is the rooster. So until today, for all those devotees who want their wishes to be granted by Lord Muruga and who want to be blessed by Lord Muruga himself, they continue the practice of carrying a kavadi during Thaipusam. There are many different types of kavadi that devotees can carry. For example, the smaller kavadis are the pal kavadi or the milk pot kavadi, like this one over here. There's also the Alangara kavadi or the peacock feathers kavadi, like this one over here. We also have the Pushpa kavadi or flower kavadis, like this one over here. And we have the beautiful, elaborate Karumbu Totti kavadi or the sugar cane baby's cradle kavadi, where parents usually carry their newborn child in a cradle. There are also other types of kavadi that are much more elaborate and probably difficult to carry. These are the kavadis with piercings, like this one over here, where there are piercings on the back or different parts of the body, and they carry a small chariot or a small frame of Lord Muruga. So from the Sri Srinivasa Perumal Temple in Serangoon Road, remember the Thaipusam procession marches all the way to the Tank Road Murugan Temple. So right there in the procession, you'll be able to see the beautiful chariot carrying Lord Murugan. And right in front will be all the singers and dancers and musicians, beautifully dressed, some with peacock feathers, others carrying the water pot kavadi, and then you have the Nadaswaram instrument players right in front leading the procession, followed by all the kavadi carrying devotees. It's a colorful, vibrant, beautiful procession and ritual and festival full of music and song and dancing and movement, all celebrating Lord Murugan, all of them devotees, giving thanks, full of sacrifice and belief and faith. Thank you for listening to the story of Thaipusam. I hope now you understand the ritual and practice behind the festival of Thaipusam and the importance of carrying a kavadi during the festival of Thaipusam. And I hope you understood more about the significance and importance of Lord Murugan within the festival of Thaipusam. Don't forget to watch my other video so you can find out more about the history of Serangoon Road with the story of Cattle Tales.